And I don't think we can really call it a meditation, because when Story leads us, we end up having experience with the divine. And really, she gave us an experiential of what it means to embody the higher self. So thank you for that perfect segue. We always have, in every holographic now moment, as Story just demonstrated, the ability to connect to divinity, to our higher self. So let's shift into talking about the integration process and how we can talk about that for daily living. As spiritual work is a very alchemical process, and it doesn't happen overnight, as we all know. So just to start, again, the title for those just joining us on Facebook is called Pathways to Higher Self-Embodiment. And one of my favorite things about ISD is that it celebrates, empowers, and encourages the following of your own path and the divine wisdom within, emphasizing the importance of listening to your own inner voice and always guiding you back to your own direct source connection. I'll never forget the first time I read the ISD Declaration of Principles. Part of me thought as I began to read them, could I really resonate with all of these? Thinking back to a lot of the dissonance I had with religion when growing up, I was so surprised when I finished reading them, because yeah, I can, and I do. I resonate with all of them. So today I'm going to touch on one of those principles a little bit more deeply as we start to talk more about the higher self. As many of you have probably experienced on your own spiritual journey, there's no guru outside of you, no teacher, no authority figure that knows better on what is right for you than you. We are here as creators, creator of our own unique universes and realities. But the fun part is we get to do it together. We are all this precious divine spark that is unique, a rare diamond, just like our fingerprint. There is no one exactly like us, and there is no one who knows us better than us. The best part about this path is that we have others to do it with. And I'm so grateful for the others in this community at ISD. We get to experience diversity, depth, different truths, different points of view. Unfortunately, there are still many who choose to judge that or condemn it or belittle it, but we choose to celebrate it here, to learn from each other, to bask in the divine love and light of each other, for replenishment, for friendship, for connection, for joy. But ultimately, at the end of the day, who is the one who is always with you in every moment, in every daydream, every night dream? You are. So the principle I'm going to talk about for a minute is, we affirm the divine right of each individual to seek the truth in accordance with their consciousness, and that living in harmony with that truth defines true spirituality, that direct source connection, right? So before we talk about pathways, journeys, and destination to higher self-embodiment, it reminds me of that Aerosmith song, life is a journey, not a destination. Let's talk about what is the higher self. What do I mean by higher self? From my experience before reaching that moment in meditation, where you feel at one with everything, the I am everything that ever was, is, and will be. Some of you I know who have experienced that moment where you feel at one with everything, where you're standing in the woods and you feel as if you're a tree rooted and you're connected to the entire network. That's where we can go in meditation. It's very exciting. In that space, there's no need for higher self, because you're experiencing the all as the all. It's a unity with all things. There's no hierarchy or lower or higher. It's this all knowing of divine union. So the higher self is a concept and a blueprint, like Story talked about the word blueprint before, that is most beneficial for ascension, to be able to resonate with higher aspects of our consciousness before we reach the I am. And it ebbs and it flows. And again, you have to decide if it's most beneficial for you. It may not be your pathway. The first thing I do when starting a new group with meditation circles is to guide souls on a journey to meet their higher self. If you listen to the meditation from the service about a month ago, we went into the higher planes to meet the divine masculine and the divine feminine, both aspects of higher self. We don't necessarily hold those divine aspects and attributes all the time in our humanness, do we? But they're always there. So the higher self is that higher mind, that wisdom that permeates your journey, that very wise part of you that knows everything about you. You may hear or experience it even through animals or a walk in nature, speaking through your thoughts. You can find it in a gut feeling. You can find it in dissonance, and you can also find it in resonance. But ultimately, it is that part of you that knows your divine soul, majestic essence. It knows your storms and why you have them, your trauma, your joy, your creative spark that lights your divine fire, your soul path. So your higher self is that inner voice that is divine love for you and your path, and the wisdom for how to navigate relationships and situations on your path. Your very wise, unconditionally loving, very best friend within. We often have been taught not to love ourselves or not to trust ourselves through society. The more we connect to our higher self, the more we begin to love ourselves and trust ourselves, seeing ourselves for who we truly are. You may find your higher self as an animal, as a spirit guide, as Yeshua or Buddha or Kuan Yin, Green Tara, Mary Magdalene, Isis, Mother Mary, Hathor. There's so many different ways it comes through. So what does your highest aspect of yourself say about you? How would it describe your divinity? Not your blemishes, but your amazingness. I empower you and encourage you to think about that this week. Of all the amazing things and characteristics of you, your triumphs that make up amazing you, how does your highest aspect see you? Our lower aspects of guilt, shame, regret, not that perspective. That is the lower inverted form from the truth. That is the lower inverted form that is not love. It's that toxic thought form. I'm talking about the very higher loving perspective. So we can do this through meditation, as Story just demonstrated, through journaling our experiences and looking for the good, writing our love story of inner relationship, not a horror story of inner thinking and how things are going to go wrong. Our highest aspect of divine love that loves us so unconditionally, that radically accepts us, shadow, light, our humanness, all of it. What a different path we start walking in our minds as our higher self when we welcome in this beautiful inner love. Our higher self doesn't often get through when we're in monkey mind, in the beta, do, B, versus B. Problem solving, fixing, crying, worrying, right? That is not our highest aspect. It comes through when we are still, silent, calm, removed from a confusing situation, that 10,000 foot view as the higher self. I often say a hawk's eye view. It's more objective than subjective. Subjective would be in the me right now, I'm in the thick of it, I can only see it from my perspective or this one ego perspective. Objective is seeing the whole picture, the whole perspective without blame, judgment, personal bias, and ego removed. So there are many great teachers, authors, ascended masters who have embodied this higher mind, this stillness, this objectivity, and they worked for it. They worked really hard for it. To still the mind, to stop the inner battles, to realize we don't have to figure everything out and fix everything. That when we relax our grip, when we step back, when we ascend up through breath, what we need comes to us more easily because we are not throwing descended thought patterns and self-sabotage on our path. These are the types of moments a higher self connection can support. So when we are in dissonance and crying tears and grasping and trying to fix and control, is our higher self gone? No. Our higher self is saying to you in that moment, something is wrong. Pay attention. You are constricted. You are tight. You are in intense fragmentation and separation from your unified existence. Pay attention. What is causing the disease? Because if we ignore it and we shove it down, this disease will continue over and over on the carousel ride until we start to pay attention. So what is higher mind suggesting here? What needs to be shifted? So our higher self is always there. Embodying it is the mindful awareness, the awakening, being awake and aware of what we are thinking, what we are feeling, and having the wisdom to see it, name it, and navigate through it by trusting ourselves to know the right way, even if others don't agree, to then walk the road of our resonance. We hold ourselves through this process with love as our higher self. So when we are in the mud, we look around, we pay attention, we feel it, we feel into it. What is this? Is this mine? We don't just keep shoving it down, hoping it goes away. Sometimes higher mind tells us we need support from others. We aren't in this alone. No one is alone. This is just the empowerment to know deep within that you do have the answers to the questions you have within you. So we shift from what would Jesus do, what would Buddha do, what would Krishna do, to what would, fill in your name, do. The ascended master in you, that voice of higher mind, higher self, higher wisdom, that our consciousness has the power to connect to in every now moment. Their voices, the voice of divine love, becomes your voice. The voice of unconditional, peaceful, pure love and support. The first time I saw my higher self in meditation, I was a flying bird. The next time I was an old woman that looked just like me with a very long gray hair. She was sitting at a stone labyrinth out west, and it was very dry climate. Later, my higher self became a black and white tiger. And at that point, I was being taught the concept of transcending duality, embracing shadow and light. And he was masculine, which I hadn't worked too intensely with a masculine energy before. But he was holding pure, raw, empowered strength, fortitude, and love, and modeling what that looks like. The black and white tiger had so much to teach me about my strength, seeing myself as beautiful, capable. When I encountered him in dreams or meditation, it was with divine masculine love that I can't put into words, so profoundly and accepting and in awe of me. The really magical part and divine part of this story, and why I'm telling you this, is the work we do within ourselves and with our beautiful guides. I was in awe the day that I came across that stone circle for real. I found it, I walked it, and right next to it was this most beautiful heart made out of stones, like it was meant just for me. I also had a dream at one point several years ago, and I think we delved into this in Dream Circle. Thursdays at 10 a.m. It's so fun. Join us if you haven't before. Anyway, in the dream, I was walking out on the beach and I looked up into the sky, and it was like a metaphysical art scene. The colors were phenomenal. And this woman, absolute giant like goddess in the sky, was standing next to my tiger above the ocean. Clearly, so the truth is I got angry. I felt jealous. And all I could think was, who is this woman with my tiger? Clearly, I had some more inner work to do. Our dreams often show us where we do have inner work to do. It took me a few days to dissect this dream, and I had an aha moment when I realized that it was me with my tiger. That was a higher aspect, a very expanded, higher dimensional aspect of me. The reason I couldn't recognize her is because I was in the trenches of the lower thought forms and ego. I could not resonate with who she was and what her perspective and open, loving heart was emanating at that time. But it helped me to see that aspect of me that is wiser, all-knowing, objective, to more greatly step into it and walk the talk. Oh, the friends that join us on the high self totem pole, such a blessing. So connecting to our higher self is a beautiful journey in self-love, because all of the ways that we deny ourselves, don't feel worthy of this kind of love, we will always receive it divinely through the divine love of our higher self. And if it's not loving, it's probably not your higher self. My higher aspects and guides can be fiercely loving at times, wanting to set boundaries and things like that, but they're always very loving. When we can connect to this love for ourselves, we can then more easily give it to others as well. And when we increase our forgiveness and unconditional love for self, we emanate it outward even more. That patience, the understanding, even when someone is yelling at you, to divinely know it is because they are scared, frustrated, or they don't feel safe. We shift into being triggered less by the outer reality and not needing to argue so much. We don't have to prove we are right or try to change people when we feel safe within. Our higher self connection can graciously support this beautiful growth. For big life changes, for difficulties with relationships, you can stop, pause, breathe like 10 really deep, slow, intentional breaths, and just listen within for the answer. If the answer is you needing to prove you're right, give it a couple days. Ego loves to pretend it's the higher self, and it wants to be righteous about it. If you're feeling intense righteousness, it's probably not higher self. A higher self message will be surrounded with love and grace. Does that mean we won't have to consider boundaries with others sometimes? Not at all. But instead, you may hear, trust yourself. You aren't wrong. Give it time. Things like that. But is it possible that as one, as we journey back to the awareness that we are one, that we all have essentially the same higher self, as we are all one, and that is source love, divine love, is embodying higher self, embodying pure divine love for ourself and ourself as other. Let's talk about the spiritual symbols of swords and cords for a few minutes as we continue to delve into this higher self aspect. There are lots of translations of Matthew 26, chapter 52 from the Bible, a very profound metaphysical teaching that is one of my absolute favorites. And some of you may have heard it said this way, one of Yeshua's sayings, "He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword." This version that I'm going to speak real quick is from the New American Standard Bible, and it goes like this. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword." So in other words, if you choose to fight, you will receive a fight back. If you continue to battle within, you will continue to battle in the outer, as within, so without. The keys to the kingdom of heaven on earth are given to those who are light of heart and in resonance with love. We rise and we fall until we truly master this. Because with great power must come great responsibility through thought, word, and action. True power is love, not force. And as we learn to do this for ourselves, we learn to do it better for others. Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." How powerful when looking at this multidimensionally right now. Our families, our communities, our nation, our government and global affairs. If critical mass is so divided, should we then ask ourselves, is it because we are so divided within our own psyches? If a God psychologist assessed and diagnosed the mental health of the planet, what do you think the diagnosis would be? For those in the psychology field, I bet you're starting to name them off. But we are in a very powerful shift of consciousness on this planet. The age of Aquarius, where the energies have never been better for harmonic convergence, for heart-to-heart living. So the more we do the work within, the more we heal the planet, one by one. Again, as within, so without. So back to swords for just a minute. Oh, the many swords in the human-created spiritual constructs. They have lots of meanings, as all symbols do. So we must use our discernment, especially in the realms of duality, of black and white, as my tiger would say. As I was working on this part of the homily, a really beautiful connection came through, and it was on an Instagram profile called Pharaoh's Egyptian. I just want to give them credit. And it was a picture of the swords of Stavanger, Norway. I don't know if anybody's ever seen those before. It's a monument of 3 swords, all different heights, and they're huge. It was created by a sculptor and unveiled by King Olaf V of Norway in 1983. Yeah, it sounds a bit like Olaf, doesn't it? Maybe that's how he got his name from Frozen. So many gems in that movie. Olaf loves warm hugs, talking about heart to heart. Anyway, back to the point. These swords were planted into the rock of a small hill next to the fjord. And they commemorate a battle in 872, when the current king gathered all of Norway under one crown. The largest sword represents the victorious king, and the 2 smaller swords represent the defeated kings. The monument also represents peace, since the swords are planted into the solid rock, so they may never be removed or used again. Lay down thy sword. My higher self has recently been showing me an alternative to cord cutting. because swords are often related to cord cutting. So that must be why this whole thing came in when I was doing this. I often see a sword, and I know others do when we talk about cord cutting. And it's associated with, cutting the cord so that you're no longer connecting to the negative energies of others. So this kind of brings us back to a house divided, right? When we really think about this from a higher perspective. When we can feel and see the phrase like split ends of hair running through an energetic cord with another. Some of us can actually feel that and see it, right? When it feels dark and gray and yucky and greasy and grimy. What if instead we send loving golden light and reparation energetically through that cord to heal the separation felt with other? It doesn't mean we have to have them in our lives or spend a lot of time with them. But here we are sending love and forgiveness and blessing the lesson or the wisdom from experiencing this relationship in our life. All souls are here to teach us and show us something that is ultimately within ourselves, some way, somehow, even when it's really hard to see it that way. So instead of cutting away a part of ourself, self with a capital S, what if we heal it instead to bring ourselves back to unity, forgiveness, healing, and oneness, a sort of soul retrieval versus soul fragmentation, if it resonates for you. Again, there's lots of different levels and dimensions to cord cutting, so that's just one aspect. So back to the title of this homily. What are the pathways to higher self-embodiment? That is the one thing I cannot answer for you. You'll have to ask your higher self, as it is a very personal journey. Because my truth isn't necessarily your truth, and my path isn't your path. Trust your path, even if it turns heads, even if others don't agree, even if it's exhausting. Trust your path. What you do will influence this world in a powerful way. You may not see it right away, but seeing isn't believing. Believing becomes seeing. The butterfly and the butterfly effect theory doesn't necessarily see how it flapping its wings influenced all of creation with a simple flutter of the heart. It comes together. It just does. And you look and you say, wow, that really makes sense now. And even if it doesn't, to you at first, it will. Even if your decisions or path don't make sense to others, even if it does only to one or two, or a handful, or maybe only 144,000. If it makes sense to you, that is the most important part. Others will come and go. Some will stay long, some will stay short, and some will stay until your last breath. But you will always be there, and cherish the ones that you have with you along the way. I will not tell you your pathway, but I will tell you from my path that the pathway to higher self-embodiment is stillness, quietude, peace. For me, through meditation, to be able to hear my divine voice, the voice of I am, getting to know self, becoming your own best friend, listening to the inherent wisdom that is already within you. That reminds me, last week, I texted the other ministers and I said, Sue is singing one of the songs from the hymnal to me. Getting to know you, getting to know all about you, hoping you like me too. What a self-love song that is too. So the pathway could really just be all about love, opening the heart, connecting to the heart and the heart-mind for heart-mind coherence. To fall in love with yourself and everyone and everything. Even when someone crosses the street giving you the middle finger, you can be objective and loving. As you are now with yourself when you are in those moments. Forgiving yourself, seeing how and why are you creating I'm not safe, which is the root of all fear. Holding self with love like a precious baby, and that self that we emanate outward to our brothers and sisters, the self that is all of us, the ancient wisdom of self with a capital S, I am. You are loved unconditionally, completely, and unapologetically through higher self-source love. How could source not love itself as you? And how could you as source not love itself as everyone else? All versions and potentialities of what we could experience, we get to see through other. Against the grain of the typical, boring, mundane, our diversity is what makes this beautiful adventure so thrilling. So does having a bad day mean we aren't enlightened beings? No. And the rainbow will always come back, even when we think there's no way, no how. It always does. We must hold ourselves with grace for our humanness as we shift to integrate our godliness, trusting and loving ourselves and ourselves unconditionally. The bluebirds fly again, and each rung on Jacob's ladder on our yellow brick roads spiral up in consciousness like in The Wizard of Oz. Glenda's voice becomes Dorothy's voice. We just have to remember that we have our ruby slippers on, and even if we can't feel them or see them in this moment, we will again tomorrow. Faith and trust, the foundation for this path. Click, click, make a wish. The power and the responsibility is in your hands. Wide open spaces, like the song story played earlier. Oh, and don't forget, you have your inner Glenda, to remind you that you have your ruby slippers and to remind you to trust yourself and love yourself. A few quotes to finish up from the Tao Te Ching. Failure is an opportunity. If you blame someone else, there is no end to the blame. Therefore, the master fulfills her own obligations and corrects her own mistakes. She does what she needs to do and demands nothing of others. From New Age teacher Dolores Cannon, The 3 Waves of Volunteers in the New Earth. Quote unquote, people are always asking me what they have to do to move to the new earth. They said there are 2 things you have to let go of. And she's referring to they as like the higher self that comes through with her clients that she worked with. To let go of fear. It must be released or it will hold you to the old earth. The second is karma. What did you learn from your bad experiences? Forgive them and let them go. And I just want to add in here that we can often perpetuate our karma by feeling like we are deserving of it. Well, you're not. You are not the small, insignificant, temporary judged thing. You are an eternal, divine, rainbow light body being. Let it go. Honor and celebrate who you are, who you truly are, your whole highest aspect. The rest is an illusion of the parasitical aspects left in the collective mind that we shall so heal. And we do it so beautifully together. Lastly, a quote from Ramana Maharshi. The greatest obstacle to enlightenment is getting past the delusion that you are not already enlightened. Thanks, everybody.